and welcome to In This Corner, the podcast, a buck 57. Boxing's biggest names, boxing's biggest stories, boxing's biggest fights, greatest memories and moments. We cover it all with style and panache. And the Grovester, Lee Groves. He's an author, he's a writer, he's a CompuBox counter. And yes, he is one of the best historians in boxing today. How you doing, Lee?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Good stuff, good show, great show, because coming up a little bit later on, we'll have the Pride of Wales, arguably the greatest 168-pound fighter ever. Joe Calzaghe will be on with us. Look forward to that. Got a lot to get to before that, but we'll start out with I got to see you face-to-face, one-on-one, mano a mano. I gave you a break and didn't kick your ass, but Charley Burley, my dog, did. Tell us about tell the audience about your experience here for WrestleMania.
Yeah, this is a trip that I'm going to remember for the rest of my life for a lot of different reasons. For one, I've been a wrestling fan since the mid-1970s, but WrestleMania 41 was my very first live event. I mean, talk about going big, right? And I really need to thank Joe Tessitore for the tickets that put me just 150 feet away from ringside. For another, this experience put me out of my comfort zone on many, many levels. I was on an airplane for the first time in nearly 2 years. I dealt with electronic event tickets for the first time. And in order to get them, I had to download the Ticketmaster app into my phone and then create an account on the Las Vegas Raiders website, despite me being a Steelers fan. I don't have an account on the Pittsburgh Steelers website, but in order to get that ticket, I had to get on the Raiders website. I also downloaded the Uber app on my phone, and I learned to get around that way instead of using a taxi. Couple hiccups there, but I got the gist of it. Then there was the incredible atmosphere surrounding WrestleMania week, such as what I saw at WWE World. That's the multi-day fan event, which one can get photos and autographs with the stars, as well as engage in many different experiences, such as walking the aisle to your favorite wrestler's entrance music, playing the latest version of WWE video games, and even getting married on the spot with a WWE themed.
Did you get married?
No. I didn't
Okay.
engage in that. I just took a picture of it. Thank goodness. And then there was the energy of the event itself. I was one of the 63,000 plus fans inside Allegiant Stadium on both nights of WrestleMania, and I experienced everything that happened there. But the biggest challenge for me was dealing with our good friend Charley Burley, and this is why. I've had a deep-seated fear of dogs for most of my life because I had a bad experience with one when I was around 7 years old. And I got to say this about Charley. Even though he's about 75 pounds, and even though he doesn't seem to know his own strength, he is probably the friendliest dog I've ever been around. He doesn't bark, he doesn't bite, and he loves everybody. But the concept of a dog his size and a dog his strength running at me and jumping all over me every time he sees me, that was a lot for me to deal with. And you did show me a few tricks to help me with all that. And in the end, I think everything went really well. I'm not afraid of him, but I'm still leery about jumping on me. But it really helped out there.
Yeah, it was great having you. We got to go to my favorite pizza place in town, Grimaldi's Pizza.
Yeah,
And,
good stuff.
and have a great time. So I was glad to have you, and I'm glad you had a great time. Thank you, Joe, for hooking
Thank
him
you.
up, baby.
Thank you.
So we got a lot to get to,
We
and a
do.
lot of work for you. You're going to be working more than overtime on this show because not only you're going to do most of this stuff here, but you're going to do a top 10 168 pounders of all time later in the show. But let's
Yeah.
just get right to what's we got a busy Cinco de something weekend in boxing, Cinco de New York and Cinco de Riyadh and Cinco de Mayo. So just get to it, if you will.
Well, I'm going to first review the major fight of last
Yes.
week. Um, Last Saturday on DAZN, one of the year's most anticipated fights in the UK took place before approximately 67,000 fans inside Tottenham Hotspur Soccer Stadium in London. And while the original intent was to extend the family feud between the Eubanks and the Benns to another generation, the fight night atmosphere and the fight between Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn exceeded all expectations. There were all sorts of side stories like the egg slapping incident, the rift between the dads, and Chris Jr. having to pay the equivalent of 500,000 US dollars by missing weight by 2 ounces. But the Eubanks apparently reconciled. Benn had enough power to stun Eubank early in the fight, and the action throughout was better than anyone could have ever hoped for. In the end, Eubank won 116, 112 on all three scorecards. I had it a little closer, 115, 113. And according to the contract, there was a rematch clause, and initial reports indicated that it would be in September, right back in Tottenham Hotspur. But Eddie Hearn, Benn's promoter, said that he would rather have Benn return to 147 and fight WBC champ Mario Barrios. What are your thoughts about the event? What are your thoughts about the fight? What'd you think of it?
They're not their fathers. By the way, we'll ask Calzaghe about Chris Eubank Sr., won't we?
Yeah.
When we have him on. But I thought, you know what? What it lacked in great, skill and guile and style points, boy, did it make up for in ferocity. I
Yeah.
mean, these guys, honestly, it was a Gotti Ward type of fight for, we like to call them back in the day Pier Sixers. It was a Pier 12 rounder. And I don't know if either guy will be the same after it. We got a lot to get to, but what I will say is they surpassed any damn expectations. Brilliant atmosphere there. The Brits know what the hell they're doing. And on that night, those two guys gave it all. Hats off. I don't wear a hat, but hats off to them. It was spectacular, and I'm glad the fans got to see and enjoy it. And the right guy won, in my opinion.
Yeah, he did. And the hits keep rolling in the UK because it looks like another big fight is going to land there as Alexander Usyk and Daniel Dubois will fight for the undisputed heavyweight title July 19th at Wembley Stadium. Usyk stopped Dubois in their first meeting in August 2023, but this time Usyk will be fighting a very confident guy in Dubois, who, since losing to Usyk, has knocked out Jarrell Miller, Philip Bergovich, and Anthony Joshua.
Yeah.
It should be a very interesting fight this time.
Dangerous fight for dangerous rematch for Usyk for all the reasons that we'll get a chance to talk about as we lead up to that fight. Hopefully we can get both guys on before then. It's going to be an interesting fight. Now, let's move on to some stuff that's coming up this weekend. It's going to be busy pugilistically.
Very much so. The Cinco de Mayo holiday has long been a huge boxing week because of Mexico's influence on the sport, but this year's observance may be one of the biggest I've seen in many, many years because the boxing world will present not one, not two, but three marquee events. Now, by the time you see this, one of them will already have taken place. But since we're taping on Tuesday, I'll preview Friday's show that took place at Times Square in New York. This show marked the return of Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia, a little more than a year after their controversial fight that saw Garcia's victory turned into a no decision because of his failed drug tests. Both of them were making their debuts at 147. Haney against former unified 140-pound champion Jose Carlos Ramirez, and Garcia against former 140-pound titleist Rolando Raleigh Romero. We've talked about that fight in the past. Let's see how my crystal ball is working. I think that Haney outboxed Ramirez and won a solid 12-round decision, and that Garcia scored a mid-rounds TKO over Raleigh. Now, the third fight on the show featured hometown hero and WBO super lightweight champion Teofimo Lopez against mandatory challenger and secondary WBO titleist Arnold Barboza Jr. I think the fight itself won't live up to the war of words leading up to it. Both of them are smart. Both of them are technically proficient. But I think Lopez is just a little bit better in all categories. My prediction, and you all know this by the time you see this, I think Teofimo would win on points. And today in Saudi Arabia, so Canelo Alvarez will try to become a two-time undisputed super middleweight champion when he fights William Skull, who was given the IBF title after Canelo chose to fight Edgar Berlanga, one of his other mandatories, instead of fighting Skull. The objective is clear. Canelo's next fight is expected to happen this September at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas against Terence Crawford. And if Canelo wins, as expected, the big story will be Crawford's attempt to become the first man to win undisputed titles in three weight classes in the four-belt era. And for that to happen, Canelo has to win Saturday. I've seen several Skulls fights. He's a good, solid operator. He has quicker hands than Canelo. He has faster feet. He can switch hit like Crawford, and he's fundamentally sound. However, Skull is not a big hitter, and this is his first major marquee pay-per-view event. Skull has fought 23 times as a pro, and Canelo will be fighting his 22nd championship caliber opponent. He has 244 championship rounds compared to Skull's 144 professional rounds. The experience gap is monstrous, and I think that Canelo will get the job done, and I wouldn't be surprised if he actually scored a late TKO. So, while Canelo will spend Cinco de Mayo weekend in Saudi Arabia,
the monster will be in Vegas.
Correct. And Naoya Inoue will defend his undisputed 122-pound title Sunday against Ramon Cardenas, who is ranked first by the WBA, and he's also ranked by several other organizations. Just like Canelo versus Skull, there will be a monstrous gap in terms of experience. Inoue is 22-0 with 20 knockouts in widely recognized world title fights, while Cardenas is 26-1 with 14 knockouts as a professional. It also concerns me that Cardenas was dropped for the first time in his career in his most recent fight against Brian Acosta. Yeah, Cardenas won on points, but he's now fighting the monster who operates on an entirely different level. Inoue comes into this fight on a 10-fight knockout streak. Look for him to extend that to 11. And the co-feature will see Mexico's Rafael Espinoza defend his WBO featherweight title against Texan Edward Vasquez. Vasquez has won 2 in a row since losing a razor-thin majority decision to then IBF 130-pound champ Joe Cordina, a fight more than a few people thought he should have won. This time, I don't think there's going to be any controversy. I'm picking Espinoza to retain by TKO.
So we had WrestleMania in Vegas, and now we get Monster Mania here in Vegas tomorrow.
Yeah.
We're going to take a little break. When we come back, the pride of Wales, Joe Calzaghe, after you hear this.
I got two options. Option one, I can accept defeat. Option two, I can get up. I can get tougher. I can get faster. I can get stronger. And then I go get mine. I made my choice. Have you made yours?
Back on In This Corner, the podcast, boxing's biggest names, biggest stories, biggest fights, greatest memories and moments. We do it all. Dawn just sent me a text and said to do my hair. How does my hair? I think my hair looks pretty damn good, but not quite as good as this guy right here who joins us. I seldom get excited to have dudes on because I've been blessed to start out with guys like Ali and get to hang around and get in the ring with guys like Sugar Ray Leonard and Roberto Duran. But, you know, the last 20 years or so, nobody to me that I've enjoyed being around more, doing a show with, getting in the ring with, is the pride of Wales. 46-0, 32 KOs over a 15-year career, 21 successful title defenses against the likes of Chris Eubank Sr., guys like Charles Brewer, Jeff Lacey, Omar Sheikha, Byron Mitchell, Charles Brewer, Bernard Hopkins, Roy Jones Jr., and the list goes on. As a fighter, I think nobody demonstrated the kind of DLT, distance, leverage, and timing that this guy did, and he did it with a motor second to none. Certainly would have easily been a great 15-round fighter. I could go on, but let me just say hello to Hall of Famer, the pride of Wales, Joe Calzaghe. Good to see you, Joe.
Yeah, good to see you too. Long time no see, mate. Long time no speak.
I know, and I don't remember everything about our last experience, but I know it was monumental because it was when you were being inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame. Tell the folks watching, listening, what LAB, life after boxing, has been like for Joe Calzaghe.
Yeah, it's been ups and downs. I think starting boxing age 9, winning titles till age of 13, fighting on the best stage. It's a hell of a ride, and the blessing was having my father Enzo in the corner, the guy that got me into boxing, to share them, beautiful times, amazing nights, in the States, obviously in Cardiff at home, and yeah. It's been ups and downs, like I said, being retired like any sportsman, I think you speak with a lot of sports people, even though, thank God, I retired on my own terms, which is rare in boxing, where I retired when I wanted to retire, and I want to be one of the very few people that retires from boxing on my own terms, undefeated, which is the big key there. Yeah, it's tough. I'll be honest with you, all I've done is box, and to outside of it, I basically, yeah, you got to look for a new pathway in life. At the end of the day, it's like, yeah, it's a tough one, mate. It's tough.
What has been the toughest? I know, and we might as well get it out of the way now, because I fell in love with your dad, and I only met him a few times. I never had a relationship with my dad like that, and I just fell in love with your pops. And we might as well get it out of the way. How tough has that been for you, the loss of Enzo?
Yeah, it was. I'll be honest with you, I still think about him every day. He was my hero, my best friend. Obviously, we know him as a trainer, but he was so much more than that. I miss him every single day. It's he shouldn't have gone when he did, but that's another story. And yeah, it's tough, mate. We had such a partnership. Not just people see the boxing side of it, but just as a dad. As my best friend, and you met him, like you said, and everybody met Dad. Enzo is touched by him because he was a unique character. He was an artist, a tremendous musician, a singer. And then he suddenly became an undefeated world boxing trainer. Like, you can't even write that story up, So, I miss him. I lost my mum about 60 months after Dad. So yeah, it's been a rough ride, bro. You know what I mean? But God is great. I have my 2 older boys. Joe Jr. is 30. I have a little granddaughter, and my other son's in Australia. Man, Conor. He's having a good. He's doing well, and I have another Vincenzo. So a little 2-year-old Enzo after his granddad, after his nonna, and another one on the way. But yeah, so. Yeah, life's good, but you never know what life throws at you. But what do
you think it was, Joe? What do you think
it
it was? A lot of father-son relationships in boxing don't work out. Yours was, your dad wasn't even an ex-fighter. He had so many interests. What was it, if you could pin it down? Why did it work so well?
Well, if I just go back a little bit, right? So my dad was a musician and a very talented footballer. But he did have knowledge of boxing. The reason being, my nonna, my granddad, he had about 15 fights, amateur fights, in the army. So he had an instinct knew of the box a bit. So he taught my dad. And back in them days, we had no boxing gyms in Sardinia. Dad's main love was obviously football and music, but he didn't do it reading the book. He taught me on the box. So when he took me to a boxing gym as a 9-year-old, the old trainer at the amateur boxing club, named Paul Williams, On the very first day he took me, he said, "Where's your son been boxing before?" My dad said, "This is his first day in the gym." He went, "No, your boy's overclass." Who taught me? He said, "I taught myself." So, he watched a lot of boxing. Sugar Ray Leonard, Marvin Hagler, our favorite fighters, maybe in his way with the music. And he was a genius. He sort of sculpted me into the fighter I was.
Lee, take it away, baby.
Before I go into my questions, I want to throw a couple of stats at you just to illustrate how great this man really was. You are one of a handful of fighters to retire undefeated, as you said. And in terms of wins, your 46-0 is only behind Jimmy Berry's 59-0-10, Ricardo Lopez's 51-0-1, Floyd Mayweather's 50-0, and Rocky Marciano's 49-0. And you are one of the few fighters in history to put together a championship reign that lasted 10 years or longer. The others, Abe Attell, Johnny Kilbane, Joe Louis, and Bernard Hopkins. So you are in very exclusive company on several levels historically. Now, you are best known for your incredible work rate. You kept us guys at CompuBox very, very busy, and I thank you for that, by the way.
Pleasure.
You regularly threw between 80 and 100 punches per round in most of your fights. But I remember seeing clips of you doing drills that were specifically designed to work on your volume. Could you discuss those and how did they help?
Yeah, yeah, massively help. If I go back, so early days when I was an amateur, early as a professional, I was a big puncher. So my left hand, obviously being the southpaw, was mainly my knockout punch. It started damaging my hands as a teenager. The first time I hurt my hands was as a teenager in the national championships. And right through my career, my hands become progressively worse. I had an elbow injury that basically I was unable to spar for nearly 2 years. So it's incredible. I managed to fight and I had the power performances, but I still won. But what we did with that, my work rate was always fast, and people would say to us, "Joe, you can do this in the amateurs, you can't do this for 12 rounds." But so thanks to my father kicking my ass 24/7 as a kid. And if you look at the hills and the mountains where I live in South Wales, you see that's where the engine, the lungs, the stamina was built. And I was blessed with speed. But what we did when the hands got worse, I had to adapt my style. So I knew that I'd hurt my hand. As soon as I landed in 10-ounce gloves on the head, it's gone. I had injections before in every fight. I was having cortisone injections. I couldn't spar. I sparred with 20-ounce pillows with sponge. And yeah, basically, we adapted the style over the years. So I knew, knowing that I damaged my hands, I had to throw punches and bunches. So hence, the stamina without over the years and years, 25 years of hard work, training, I was blessed with the stamina. And yeah, that's what we did because I knew if I planted my feet and I looked for that left hand and I hit on the head, I got the rest of my fight with one hand. So that was the main thing behind it. So we threw like hundreds of punches around in on the pads, as you may have seen clips. Thousands of rounds in the session. So that thankfully I had the engine and the speed to be able to keep that for 12 rounds. And I would have been old school 15-round fighter. I mean, I was trained for 15 rounds.
So I think they kept track of how many punches you threw during your training sessions. Do you remember the highest number that you threw in a given round?
In the training session?
In the training sessions, like 200,
okay,
250?
I'll be honest with you, they probably not recorded because we didn't record that much back then, but there'd be rounds with me and Dad in 3 minutes where we would do 3, 5, 10, 3, 5, 10. And we would do that for 3 minutes. So I don't think of the maths, but it's hundreds of punches around.
That's incredible. Absolutely incredible. And of course, last week, the Benn and Eubank families were in the news. They had a big fight involving the sons. You won your first championship from Chris Eubank Sr. So what were your memories of dealing with that fighter and that character?
Yeah, so I was a big fan of Eubank, Benn, and Steve Collins, who was actually the champion, who decided he wanted to relinquish the title 10 days before the fight. He had a few different excuses, but I was prepared for Steve Collins. It was my first major fight. I was very inexperienced at 20 out of 21 knockouts. I'd been 8 rounds once, which ironically was against his cruiserweight cousin, a guy called Bobby Joe Edwards. So Eubank stepped in at 10 days' notice. He was actually fighting on his comeback on the card. So my memories were like, wow, I'm fighting Eubank. You know, this guy is eccentric. You know, he's a dangerous. I was prepared to see Collins. I was more nervous to fight Eubank because for me, you've seen what happened with Eubank against Watson. He's a very dangerous fight and he's unpredictable. He's a very unpredictable fighter. So at that time, my hands were good. So I was, as you ever see that fight, I'm looking to knock him out in every shot. I was excited, a bit nervous, I was a bit inexperienced. But I always remember going to the Grosvenor Hotel in London for our first meeting with Chris Eubank, and I remember seeing his Harley Davidson. He used to drive a Harley Davidson, and I'm talking to my dad, and going, "Dad, look, it's Chris." "Ah, fuck, who gives a shit, man? It's Chris Eubank." Yeah, so we go in, and yeah, I always remember they said, "Joe, so what's going to happen in this fight?" And I was pretty cocky and brash at the time. I looked at him, I said, "Oh, I'm going to knock him out in 3 rounds." And he took a long stare at me. He said, "I'm going to take you to a place, boy. I'm going to take you to the trenches." And I'm thinking, fuck these trenches, what's he talking about? And then come fight night, I was really excited, really nervous. You know, my first opportunity for a world title. And I knocked Chris Eubank on his ass in the first round, but the best left hooks I ever threw. And I'm thinking, like, what trenches are you talking about, man? Is it going to be a first round win? I hit him with everything, first, second, third, fourth. And I'll be honest with you, after 5 rounds, 6 rounds, I was exhausted. You know, I didn't pace myself, the nervous energy, and you only learn on the job. You can train and spar as much as you want, but when you're in the lights and you got your first world title against a great fight like Chris Eubank, who had nearly as many world title fights than I had fights. I literally, like I said, I've been 8 rounds once, so it was hard. It was hard, but obviously my heart desire showed up a lot of people I could take a punch, that I had the heart and the will to become a world champion. It was harder the fight, sweet the victory. You know, it was my toughest fight ever. You know, I wouldn't say Chris Eubank's the best. He's not the best opponent in box, but that stage of my career was the toughest fight. I was exhausted. You know, I managed to come through that, and yeah, that was my memories. And you know, for my dad Enzo to lift me up, and the new against a great fighter and a great personality in Chris Eubank. And to this day, I always thank him. You know, I tell that story and I say, "Chris, you give me that experience of that 12 rounds was more than every single fight I had." And I showed, you know, that, you know, I've got the skills and the heart and the belief to become a champion for a long time, which I did.
We're chatting with Joe Calzaghe, the pride of Wales, 46-0. Arguably, and not a lot of people will argue, the greatest 168-pounder of all times. Lee, I know you got a few more.
Yeah, another one of your landmark fights was against Jeff Lacey in March 2006.
Boy, did he undressed. Lacey is still naked. He's never had any clothes on since that damn fight.
Yeah, but you know, in America, Lacey was seen as a heavy favorite, mostly because they probably didn't know who you were. But once you got into the ring, you not only did you comprehensively outbox him, you dropped him in the final round. And one can make a pretty strong argument that Lacey was never the same after that.
He wasn't.
How satisfying was that win for you? Because you proved a lot of people wrong.
I've proved basically, if I just say over here in the UK, being a champion for 8 years when I fought Lacey, I say 90% of all so-called experts, so all the press, the boxing news, the boxing monthly, the local paper, the national papers, all said I was going to get knocked out. So from always being the favorite to fighting somebody, your first unification fight, because I beat 6 former world champions when they just lost, which is very frustrating. Never having that opportunity at the age of 33, finally getting the Jeff Lacey fight. To me, it was everything. You know, it was like going for my first world title fight because I knew that I would be judged on that fight with Lacey. I saw him as a danger, as a threat. You know, I watched his fight against Robin Reed, it's Scott Pemberton. I could see he was a big puncher. He was knocking people out. But the one guy that said the way he would pan out and the one that believed me 100% was the guy who never boxed, is like my dad. And I remember that I had a hand injury 9 days before our fight. hand injury. I went to London, Harley Street. They gave me a cortisone injection. The doctors, they said, Joe, you can't fight this fight. And I always remember on the train on the way home, and I won't say all the language, but just think of Joe Pesci and Goodfellas. The effing and this expletive. You think you can't pull out this fight? This fight won't come back. Basically, I call you a big chicken and go fight this fight. So many fights have pulled out. This was my time. They come over for Jeff Lacy, but it was my time to show everybody in the States and everybody around the world what I could do on the big stage. So I remember going to the gym and speaking with Dad, and he said exactly what would happen. He said, listen, forget what they say. This guy moves about. I can't do the punches here because I'm on the phone, but this guy moves 5 times, he throws 1 punch. You throw 5 punches and move once. He said, do the maths. He said, you're going to dominate. I'm thinking, it's not going to be that easy, Daddy. I'm telling you, this fight is going to make you. If I didn't fight that fight, I wouldn't be in Nash Boxing Hall of Fame. I probably wouldn't have unified the title. That fight was the big fight for me. I had some great fights at the end of my career. And that fight, thank you, God bless my father, that basically said, man, one hand you're going to beat this guy. I was 100%. But I went in that ring, and if I had to pick one performance where fitness and sort of everything come together on the biggest stage, so it was amazing, to be able to dominate a fellow world champion and put on a performance like it did, especially being written off by 90%, and what do people say afterwards? You weren't that good. You overrated. Listen, you can't win. You can't win, The people that say I was going to get knocked out say overrated. Maybe they just don't want me to win. Who knows? But I made him look average that night. Made him look very average,
Yeah. And another defining win was against Mikko Kessler in November 2007 before 50,000 fans in Cardiff, Wales. He was 7 years younger. He held 2 of the belts, and he was perceived to be the best in the weight class. Despite all that you had done, this was the young gun. But once again, you raised your game and you delivered an excellent performance, especially in the second half of the fight. What do you recall about that match?
Yeah, well, Mikko Kessler, completely different gravy altogether to Jeff Lacy. You had 2 champions. Although I had to relinquish IBF, essentially it was for the Undisputed World Championship. I was IBF, WBO Ring Magazine, and he was WBA, WBC, man. And he was undefeated in 39 fights. I think at the time I was 45, so huge fight. Yeah, and I remember seeing his confidence. I always look to try and get an advantage. It's all mind games. I don't really talk too much as the eyes. You will see some weaknesses, but I'll be honest with you, I could see he was up for the fight, that he thought he was going to win. And that fight was about my experience and being able to adapt. It's very important to have a plan B, but when you don't talk, it's not something you practice. I was attacking southpaw early in my career, then I started to box more and use my speed. I remember it hit me 2 big uppercuts in the 4th round, and just as well I got a great chin because I ain't gonna lie, he buzzed me up a bit with them uppercuts. Things weren't going to plan. I was getting too excited. I was too aggressive, and then I just had to box. I had to use my boxing skills, use my jab and feint in head and body, and like I said, I managed to pull away in the second half of the fight. But yeah, he was a great fighter, undefeated at the time, and I think that. Yeah, that was my last fight at super middleweight. Like, we were the best 2 in the world by far at that time. And I said to Dad Enzo, I said, listen, this is my last fight at 168 because it was a struggle to make the weight as well. I mean, I lost 36. I'm trying to work out about 18 kilos for that fight. 18 kilos.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot of weight,
Yeah.
So I try to work out the stone because the US to the bounty. It's around 18 kilos, yeah. 18, 19 kilos. It was a lot of weight, and I didn't. So after that fight, to me, that was everything. Unifying the titles after all them years, 10 years, a decade as a champion.
But you know what? Yeah, but there was more. You wanted a couple of other things and a couple of other dudes at $175. There was I first met you when you were getting ready to fight Bernard Hopkins, and of course you defeated him and you defeated Roy Jones. you made it exciting for people by getting dropped in the first round of those fights. Talk about those last two fights of your career against two of the all-time greats, Hopkins and then Jones, and what a way to punctuate a brilliant career, Joe.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say, Smitty, mate. That's what I'm going to say. Like, after that fight, I knew that was at the end for me as a super middleweight, and there was two things missing. One was to go to the States, because as a European fighter, the British fight, I think is important. And I wanted to go, and then I used to read, like, he doesn't want to travel and this and that. But it was important to me to go to America and fight one of the greats in Bernard Hopkins. The fight, I went over to America. I went over to Vegas when Ricky Hatton boxed Mayweather, for the sole reason of bumping into him, which happened, and he said them comments, and I thought, I never let white boy beat me, and I was offended by it. I wasn't offended, but at the end of the day, it's like the fight was made, and what can I say? It was great. He was. I was quite injured. I was injured going into that fight. I had certain injuries as well, so I wasn't 100%. But fighting Tom Jones singing national anthem, the amount of people in the ringside, and my name up in lights was incredible. For where me and dad come from humble beginnings, from a council estate, and for the struggles we had, man, to at the end of my career to be in Vegas was fantastic. And I got dropped first round. I rushed him, these slippery boots, man. What can I say?
You know what? When I think
he caught me off balance.
You weren't hurt that bad though. You weren't hurt that. You weren't hurt.
No, I wasn't hurt at all. No, it wasn't hurt at all. I got, but I was like, oh fuck. I was like, damn, I'm in Vegas. I'm away from home. I'm a 2-point round, big shit. Just keep working. But you know what? Favorite Hopkins, he had a great fight plan. He couldn't keep up with my work rate. So I figured he had to, and he knew that I like the counterpunch. So he waited and he waited and he waited, and it was a frustrating fight. And I think the second half of the fight, although it was a messy fight, I just worked and worked and worked. And like I said, got the win, which was amazing. And I knew that was it for me then. I spoke to Dad, and they said one more fight, and spoke to Roy, one of the greatest fighters of all time. And going to Madison Square Garden, America boxing, I went to Vegas, so why not finish in New York, and again, slip. No, that one hurt. They hit me with the forearm, I thought, oh, that one buzzed me up. But from the second round to the 12th, I enjoyed, but again, I made the hands a bit. But it's like, that was it for me, I felt something die in training, not die, but my dad always said one thing: always train like a challenger. And he said that to me as a kid. It stuck with me right from my career. And train like a challenger means always train harder than the opponent, because the opponent, regardless of his talent, regardless of his ability, or if you're better than him, if he's fitter than you and he has more heart and desire, then anybody can be beat. So as long as I match that and be fitter than whoever I'm boxing, and still have that same desire for all them years of being a champion, you have to keep your hunger, realizing, if you're not your best, anybody can lose, no matter what.
Lee, I know you wanted to ask him a question about that Carl Froch guy, didn't you?
I did. Apparently he was the mandatory challenger at the time that you decided to move up in weight. And the last couple of days in the British press, I looked at the thing, and there were two separate stories about who would win between Joe Calzaghe and Carl Froch. But you guys have a history with each other. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, obviously, Carl Froch, I didn't even know much about Carl Froch. Obviously, when he was coming through, he had a good career afterwards, But when I was IBF, I didn't realize he was number one challenger. But when I was IBF champion, obviously Kessler held the other belts. I knew he was going to be my world title fight, and I want to be undisputed. So we were just at wrong times. I was at my peak, and he wasn't ready for me. He wasn't ready to take me on. And at the end of the day, I wanted to finish off against the best. That was my plan. After Lacey, I want to fight the best. With a bit of frustration, hence why I really wanted to fight Kessler. I held out for Kessler. I was going to demo for Kessler. Then Hopkins was Ring Magazine champion, and then one of the greatest fighters in Roy Jones Jr. So that was my aim at the end. And listen, you always got challenges. I fought titles. You always got mandatories. At the end of the day, I was on a time schedule. I was 10 years of world champion. I'd done 9 years of fighting mandatories, voluntaries, and everything to lose, nothing to gain. Finally, I'm actually getting belts. And with a Lacey fight, finally realizing my dream of getting all the belts, you know. So that was the important thing for me, to getting all the belts and beating the best. And that's, like I said, that's what I did against Kessler, and beat the best light heavyweight in the world with Bernard Hopkins, you know, who people are saying again, he was old. Listen, he wasn't that much older than me, and he won the world title 5 years after I beat him. So listen, the guy is
Oh,
one
damn,
of the,
he fought 75 more years after that fight with you.
Seemed like it.
I won't ask you.
Not that old, mate.
No, not you. Bernard fought 75 years, it seems like, after that fight. But I won't ask you what would happen head to head with anybody, because I got to tell you something about you that I admired. I was lucky enough that you were kind enough to share the ring with me twice. The only fighter that I've ever done 2 in-rings with was Joe, once with Bernard looking on ringside at Mandalay Bay when we did it, and then we did it again in Canastota. You were kind enough to do it with me when you were enshrined. But one of the things, and I'm looking right here at me with Muhammad Ali, and one of the greatest attributes, I could go on and on about your physical attributes, but I think one of the things you possessed, as much as any fighter I've ever seen, is a real confidence, not bullshit, not this bravado and all the crap that we see with kids today. You really had this belief, like an Ali. Where did that come from?
That's a good question, Smitty. That's a good question. I don't know. I think, success, winning breeds confidence. But I know, I just always had this confidence. And listen, even when I was at 13, 14, I was winning British title. I was the best in Britain at 13. I won my first national title, 36 kilograms. That's how long ago, in 1985. Wow. And from that time, the first round win against the English champion, and with my dad, man, who made me believe, even when I got told I was never going to do shit in my life, always said to me, Joe, you're going to be a world champion. I believed it. And I would tell my teachers this, and they would laugh. People would laugh at me in school because I'm going to be a world champion. But he gave me this belief that when I grew up and I started winning titles when I was injured and defending when I was injured. And then at the end, I don't know what it is. I just had this faith and belief that it was my destiny just to win all my fights. It's hard to really explain in words, to be honest, mate.
Well, you certainly had it, and I certainly was able to see it and feel it. We're probably going to close out the show with a question that I asked you when you were on my show. How does Joe Calzaghe want to be remembered as a fighter and, more importantly, as a man? We'll probably close out with that, but I'm going to ask you again right here to close out this interview. How does the Pride of Wales, Joe Calzaghe, want to be remembered as a fighter, but really more importantly, as a man?
Oh, as a fighter, somebody always wanted to give 100%, always wanted to impress the fans, always had time for my fans, I care what people think. I'm a very sensitive person, and after this, I'm a different person outside the ring, than I am inside the ring. I have this sort of, put my superhero cape on, and I'm this kick-ass guy that just wants to destroy, but deep down, I'm a nice guy. I'm pretty shy sometimes, but one thing to be remembered, I just always got time for my fans, always stop to help somebody if I can help somebody, and just try to be the best person I can be, try to be a good dad, try to be a good partner and be a good friend, and just be a good person, mate.
Well, I hope like heck I get a chance to see you again, period, but I hope you end up coming back to the International Boxing Hall of Fame in Canastota. You and I
I'll be there next year, as a promise, bro. Next year I'll be there, man. Yeah, and we'll get in that ring and have another interview, okay?
Yeah, we will. But we want to thank you for joining us on In This Corner. It's always a pleasure to see you, and I'm glad you're doing so doggone well with life after boxing, LAB as I call it. Joe Calzaghe, thanks for joining us on In This Corner, mate.
Thank you, mate. Thank you. Like to speak to you both. God bless and all the best, guys.
The great Joe Calzaghe will be back.
I got 2 options. Option 1, I can accept defeat. Option 2, I could get up. I could get tougher. I could get faster. I could get stronger. And then I go get mine. I made my choice. Have you made yours?
Back on In This Corner, the podcast. Boy, I love Joe Calzaghe. Used to love to watch him fight, dig him as a person, and good stuff there. Speaking of good stuff, Joe has some pearly whites. And he always kept his mouthpiece in, too. That's an important thing, even when he got some of those flash knockdowns. What a segue for Dr. Nam
Fun.
Yes, Dr. Nam Phan. He specializes tremendous expertise in full mouth cosmetic, veneers, crowns, implants is where he really shines. Like Calzaghe has a great motor as a fighter. Really, Dr. Phan is fantastic with implants, and I'm pushing that because a lot of dentists, most dentists can't do it. And he also does so many other things with sedation and things that he's just really comprehensive in the way he goes about it. Also, what he tries to do, you heard Joe there talk about how important the fans are to him. One of the things about Dr. Nam Phan, his patients are important, and he realizes, and he's realized this all along, we are in some tempestuous financial times right now. And one of the great things he does is he has a wide range of affordable financial options tailored for the needs of his patients. So he's not just working on your mouth. He's also trying to help you with your pocketbook. And Dr. Phan is all over the place. He's in Las Vegas. He's in New York, in Jersey. He might even come out when I do the Vito Melnicki Jr. fight in New Jersey in June on ESPN2. Now, Dr. Nam Phan is located all these places, but I just want to give you one number because it's the easy way to get a hold of him. If you need any type of dental work like we've mentioned with implants and what have you, 702-637-9168, 702-637-9168, Dr. Nam Phan. All right. So from there we go to Lee Groves and his top 10 168 pounders of all times. Take it away.
Well, when you put together lists like these, it depends on what you like. Like, for instance, if you want to put together a list of who would beat who, prime versus prime, Roy Jones would probably be number one because of Roy's blend of speed and power would be too much for just about everybody. Perhaps the guy that we had on today, an exception to that. It would be a good fight either way. But if you were to put together a list of the best fighters ever to compete between 161 and 168 pounds, you would have to include the Four Kings and Sugar Ray Robinson, Jake LaMotta, Harry Greb, Carlos Monzon, and a whole bunch of others who weren't champions, but they fought in that weight range. For me, I'd rather list the greatest champions with a combination of eye test, head-to-head, and resume. So here's my list. Number 10, Carl Froch. We mentioned him earlier in the show. Froch held a version of the 168-pound title 3 times, and his only losses were a disputed decision against Mikhail Kessler in their first fight, a loss that Froch avenged 3 years later, and to Andre Ward in the Super 6 final. His victims include Jermaine Taylor, Andre Durrell, Arthur Abraham, Glenn Johnson, Lucian Bute, and George Groves twice. And he produced one of the greatest swan songs in history by scoring a one-punch knockout over Cousin George in their rematch and then walking away as champion. He made the most of his talent, and he certainly belongs on this list. The next 3 on my list also hail from across the pond. Chris Eubank at number 9, Nigel Benn at number 8, and Steve Collins at number 7. All of them had excellent reigns, but I put Collins above Benn and Eubank because 1, he retired as champion, and 2, he defeated Benn and Eubank head-to-head, not just once, but twice. He ended Eubank's 43-fight unbeaten streak in their first meeting and then won by split decision in the rematch, while the first Benn fight ended with Benn injuring his ankle. He forced, in the rematch, Steve Collins forced him to retire on the stool in their second fight. Number 6 on the list is Sven Notke, who, just like Joe Calzaghe, recorded 21 successful title defenses and was a unified champion. But he benefited from friendly judging in Germany on several occasions, most egregiously against Robin Reed. That said, he was an excellent technical boxer. He had quick hands, and he was a very good defensive fighter. He had a very long amateur career that included 3 Olympic Games. And like Joe Calzaghe, he retired undefeated. He was 34-0 with 6 knockouts. Number 5 is Mikkel Kessler, a terrific boxer puncher who won the 168-pound titles on 3 occasions and was thought to be the best super middleweight in the world for several years, thanks to his boxing skills and his power. He went 10-3 in title fights and was so highly thought of that more than a few people believed he could beat Calzaghe, even on Calzaghe's home turf of Cardiff. Had he done so, he would have been higher on this list. Number 4 is Roy Jones Jr., and he would have been higher on the list had he spent more than 2 years in the weight class. But Jones got a lot of business done at 168. He won the title from a weight-compromised James Toney, then recorded 5 successful defenses, all by knockout, as well as a non-title KO over a pretty good fighter in Murky Sosa. But after that, he moved up to 175 pounds. And that's where Roy Jones did a lot of his historic business. It was at 175. But he was good. He was probably at his best at 168. Boy, what a fighter he was. Number 3 is Canelo Alvarez, who is still writing his resume as we speak. He is 9-0 in 168-pound title fights. He was undisputed champion for more than 2 years before boxing politics got in the way. And he is heavily favored to defeat William Skull tonight to once again become undisputed in the 4-belt era. His victims include Callum Smith, Billy Joe Saunders, Caleb Plant, an aged Gennady Golovkin, and the then undefeated Jaime Munguia, all of whom were champions at one time or another. If he beats Skull tonight, Crawford in September, and 2 more quality foes in 2026, as his current deal with Turk Al-Sheikh demands, he might improve his position here slightly, but it's going to be very hard for him to catch the last 2 fighters on my list. One of them is Andre Ward, who not only retired undefeated, but did so as the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. He won the Super 6 tournament by defeating Kessler, Alan Green, Sakio Bika, Arthur Abraham, and Carl Froch. Very good lineup. And then he added wins over reigning light heavyweight champion Chad Dawson and the undefeated Edwin Rodriguez before moving up to 175. He doesn't have the big numbers of some of the other guys, but he beat the best of his era, and you can't ask for much more than that. And then there's number 1. And that's today's guest, Joe Calzaghe. His record at 168 makes him the slam dunk choice. He had 21 successful title defenses. He's tied with Otke for the most ever at 168. He reigned for more than 10 years as WBO champion, and by beating Kessler at age 35, he became a 3-belt champion as well as the lineal champion. He won his first belt by beating the then unbeaten Chris Eubank, and his victims include Robin Reed, Richie Woodall, Charles Brewer, Byron Mitchell, Jeff Lacey, Sakio Bika, and Mikkel Kessler, all of whom held or would hold belts at 168. Finally, his volume-punching southpaw style would be a headache for any of the names mentioned here, as well as others who were not, such as Chong Pao Park, who just missed making the list, James Toney, another honorable mention, Michael Nunn, Frankie Lyles, or even an older Thomas Hearns and Sugar Ray Leonard, who won titles very early in the history of the 168-pound class. During his career, one of his nicknames was the Pride of Wales. You said that yourself, Smitty. And for us historian, Joe Calzaghe is the best 168-pounder who has yet lived.
Yeah, hard to argue with that. Makes me feel good that I've been in the ring with three of those guys that you mentioned there. Roy Jones. Where was let's see who else was on. Was Hopkins was on that list, wasn't he?
Hopkins at 168.
Yeah, no, Jones you had, Andre, and Joe Calzaghe did shows with all of them. We mentioned Bernard a lot.
Yeah.
Did a show in an in-ring with him, show in an in-ring with Bernard, show in an in-ring with Andre, a great one with Andre Ward, who just did a fantastic interview that I saw with Joe Calzaghe. And I did two in-rings, as I mentioned, with the great Joe Calzaghe, who we were happy to have on with us today. And go ahead.
I do want to make a correction. At the time that Joe Calzaghe beat Eubank was 45-2-2. He didn't break the unbeaten streak, but Chris Eubank was a very, very good fighter still.
Yeah, interesting that all of this is coming out right after the Suns met with that tremendous atmosphere, and it really was across the pond. For everything that I critique about boxing, what took place over the weekend there was everything good about boxing. And another thing great about boxing is Joe Calzaghe. And I think what we'll do is we'll just end the show. This was Joe when he was on my show, I think was 2008, the first time I did a show with him. And I asked him then, how do you want to be remembered as a fighter, more importantly, as a man? Thank you, Joe Calzaghe. Thank you, Lee Groves.
Thank you.
Get us out of here, Joe. At the end of the day, how does Joe Calzaghe want to be remembered as a fighter, and more importantly, as a man?
Just as a man, obviously, as a fighter, I always give my all, even when I've not been 100%. I always give 100%, fight with my heart and soul in the ring. Hopefully, a lot of people remember me as a great fighter. I believe that what I've achieved as a super middleweight should get me rated maybe as the best super middleweight there's been. So I'm pretty happy that what I've achieved, and if I never box again, I'll be a very content guy.
Great to have you on the program. Thanks for joining us, Joe.
It's been a pleasure. Nice to meet you. Thanks a lot.